Good morning. Well, good morning and welcome to our Engaging with Diversity and Equity, Inclusion and Equity course with Miss Danielle Johnson. We want to welcome you again and ask that you please sign in and choose your language in the global ball that's at the bottom of your link. If you're unable to sign in with the sign in link that's in the chat, you can scan the QR code and sign in that way as well. Inspirational words. If we want to include everyone, we have to help everyone develop their talents and use their gifts for the good of the community. That's what inclusion means. Everyone contributes. So today we're going to be discussing creative safe spaces. With that, I'm going to turn this over to our instructor for the day, Ms. Danielle Johnson, our conversation catalyst. Good morning, Danielle.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you all for having me. See some familiar returning faces, so thank you. Give me just a moment to get my screen shared. And again, please let me know if you can't hear or see something. Good to go there. All right, and as shared, we will be talking about creating safe spaces. Sorry, I need to maximize a couple things on my computer and we can go. Okay, so I am your conversation catalyst this morning. Again, for those that have returned, I'm sure you all could do this spiel for me at this point, but for those that are new today, Conversation Catalysts are an event or person that causes great change. And so many of you are conversation catalysts yourselves. Please feel free to utilize that language. It's not proprietary in any way. I first was dubbed a conversational catalyst from our Kansas Leadership Center out of Wichita, Kansas. It is a global program, so they have some leadership programs that come out of the KLC. And then I also know Conversation Catalyst is a term that's also used across the country, so please do not hesitate to utilize that. It takes us from just merely facilitation to actually doing some action in the worker realms that we are engaged in. So my hope is that each of you continue to catalyze and create change, positive change in your organizations, environments, households, communities, whatever that looks like for you all. Today, we're going to co-create the space as we always do. We'll do a little mind skill set, and you'll be left with a little bit of a tool set for you all to create safe spaces in your organization or wherever you want to deploy some of this information. So now, right, co-creating the space just merely looks like us going into our conversational expectations, setting this up. And while I have done this regularly at the top of all of our workshops, I also kind of want to model what you all can utilize, because this is also a part of creating safe spaces, right? The tone that you set to start a discussion, a conversation, a meeting. These conversational expectations are available for you all to utilize as well as you create spaces, engage discussion. Take what you want, leave what you don't. So, right, facilitators reserve the right to halt the discussion and maintain order. That's a big part of creating a safe space, is ensuring that people can hop into a discussion and not feel like they're going to get railroaded, right? Sometimes conversations get heated, and they should. There has to be an appropriate level of heat to get things done. It's when the water starts boiling over and people start getting burnt that they don't want to hop into a discussion. So mitigating that temperature in a discussion in a space is what also creates a level of safety to engage. Be present and respectful in the learning space, right? Agree to disagree, share your opinions, thoughts, but we want to make sure that we're being moving forward in the short time that we have. Lean in. I ask that you lean into a space of discomfort, particularly when you're leading in discussion. Sometimes sharing your own stories or your own vulnerabilities without taking up too much space in a discussion and creating spaces are important. So please lean in. Wait, why am I talking? Why am I not talking? Some folks need a little bit more time to process. Sometimes folks don't want to just hop into the discussion, and creating spaces where you do small conversations or larger conversations creates opportunities to tag in at their comfort level, right? Challenging folks and having them challenge themselves is important, but ensuring that those that talk a lot, more extroverted friends and family, take a moment to wait so those that would like to hop in have the opportunity to hop in as well. One mic, obviously one person speak at a time. Land the plane or park the car, whatever your favorite kind of saying is. Um, Allowing folks to be able to ask their questions or share their opinions is really important, particularly when you're trying to treat a space as a learning space, right? This is an educational space. We can learn from one another. We want to be mindful of when somebody says something that maybe you don't agree with or maybe feels a little tone deaf, that we're not chastising, but we're creating the space to educate and learn and being vulnerable in that way. Assume good intent, right? These are in line this way for a reason, because once you land the plane, you might say something that's going to be hurtful, or maybe consider, no, that didn't feel tactful, whatever that might look like. We want to assume good intent when folks are sharing. And then also understanding, while we are assuming good intent, freedom of speech is not freedom from consequence, right? So I can't control your feelings and what I said. My intention might not be to be hurtful, but it maybe impacted you in a way that is hurtful. So I'm just making sure that we're being mindful of, again, being open to correction. And then stories stay and lessons lead. Feel free to share. You all will have 2 small group breakouts, and so you'll have an opportunity to engage with one another. And then coming in the larger space, we will share some stories and things. We want to make sure that we're not sharing each other's stories outside of this space, because we don't have the license to do so. But we can walk away from the principles, the missteps, the successes from one another in this space. Again, please feel free to utilize any of the things that I have shared. And I also would like to invite those of you that can to join me on screen. Obviously, this is on Zoom, and we're used to, at this point, the virtual hybrid world, but we would still love to have some face interaction if possible. So if you are in a place and space to do so, I would invite you to join us on camera this morning. And also, if you can join folks on camera when you get into your breakout rooms, that helps for a more robust conversation as well. As we lean into mindfulness, I know there's a couple folks that always raise their hand on the I am a mindfulness guru space. So we are here again, and as you all are being mindful, maybe quieting and turning off all the extra things that are going on, right? I know many of us are still 4 and 5 screens in deep, checking email, right? We are the ultimate multitaskers since COVID. I would argue that when you have an opportunity to be in a learning environment, that you in fact take advantage of being in that place and space and grounding yourself in the work that's going on with us today. In doing so, you may consider this particular quote: a culture of safety is a journey, not a destination. It requires our continuing diligence. There's not a just check the box and say, oh, we're safe now. For those of you that might be watching what's happening in the aircraft industry, you would like to think that anyone that's building a plane is ensuring a level of safety and a culture of safety, so that if there's something wrong, people feel like they can speak the truth. They feel like they can share there's an issue with what we're building, because many of us travel across the world, across the country on a plane, and we're trusting that folks are doing what they need to do on those manufacturing floors. If they don't have a culture of trust for the long-term destination, we see issues, right? We see plane doors coming off of airplanes. I'm just using that as an example of how your culture can create long-term issues that create unsafe environments, not only for that culture, but the product that you put out that then can affect everyone else. And so that's really what's at stake when we talk about a culture of safety being ongoing and not just a check the box, we did good today, right? Any of you that eat out, you eat in a restaurant, I'm certain you want a culture of physical, emotional, intelligent safety, because the product that you're eating, you want to ensure that folks are following those protocols, because you don't want to be the one that gets sick. That's the importance of creating safe spaces. If I could ask you all to be just reflective and just thinking about the space that you're in the most, be it maybe your work environment, your organizational environment, whatever that is, and being reflective of what does the safety in your culture look like? Again, work environment, organizational environment, place that you volunteer. What does that look like? So just take some time to be reflective of that. I'm going to use my most important hat, being the executive director for Wichita Habitat for Humanity. A culture of safety looks like for us both physical and psychological safety. On one side of the house, we do construction. We are literally building homes, affordable housing for folks within our community. We also have a restore, so we have a retail arm. Folks can shop or donate there. We have folks working in an office. We have folks out on job sites. So safety for everyone is important. Safety for our volunteers, safety for our staff, that is something that's near and dear to our heart. And then that psychological safety, as in someone feeling as though they can share or speak up when something's not right, someone can correct behavior, right? If someone's on the job site and they don't have a hard hat on and they need to have one on, or they keep taking the safety glasses on, taking them off, that we have a staff member that's willing to say, if you can't follow our rules, you have to come off of our job site. While we appreciate you, you're not keeping our environment safe, right? Or I feel like there's retaliation every time I speak to a manager. I get reprimanded in an inappropriate way. And I want my staff to be able to come to me as the executive director to say, I don't feel like this manager is doing what they need to do, right? A space of psychological safety. We also have some things that we really enjoy in our culture, like Brene Brown. We do a lot of the braving things. Clear as kind is the language that we like to use. When we onboard folks, people know our culture from our job description, from the questions that we ask in our hiring environment. From the time they get in the door, they know that we're fans of Patrick Lencioni and that we do the ideal team player. We do recommended readings for folks. This is very much that environment. Not everyone can do that in their environment, but there's some things that we follow and there's practices that say, hey, we're looking for this in our employees. These are our values. And you can see it and it's felt. And our managers in our 30, 60, 90-day review, we're going back to some of these values and principles. And then when we do our evaluations, we're looking at our goals and we're going back to these are the values and principles. So it's from the day you apply to the day that you do your exit interview. Even to our exit interview, did we follow our values? Were we clear? Did we see out these things that we said that we do? We do Kansas and we do a Craig Groeschel Global Leadership Summit. Habitat is a Christian organization, but it's non-proselytizing. So you don't have to be a Christian to utilize our services or be a part of our organization. That is a part of our culture and values as well, right? And we're clear about that. We also have an employee assistance program because we believe in the mental health of our employees. So we want to ensure that folks have the opportunity to get some levels of free counseling when they can, ongoing counseling, those sort of things. So that's what's a part of our culture. And that's just a few things that I wanted to share. I wanted that to just kind of jog some of your reflectiveness in the organizations that you're a part of. And if someone could just kind of share, when you think about your culture and the safety of your culture, what are some things that stand out to you all about, in my culture, we really value this particular thing, or we are all supposed to read this book, or these are the conferences that we go to. So if someone wants to just kind of share, what does your culture look like around safety, both physically and psychologically? Any one person can hop in and share. I'm hoping some folks reflected, or maybe you reflected and you realize it's not safe. I need to go. Go ahead, Adrian.
I'm trying to like tie it. I mean, that we have, our mission, vision, and values, right? We have, what we call our key performance indicators, I guess you want to say, about how we should treat everybody and how we should treat our clients. But then when you're talking about the safety aspect of it, I'm like, well, we're on computers 8 hours a day, more than 8 hours a day. So one of part of our culture is IT awareness, right? So we have the videos that come to us to make sure that we're aware of the new hacking trends, phishing attacks, those kind of things. We also have policies, procedures in place as well. So it's like our hard hat for the construction site is IT security and awareness for our users. That's how I'm kind of thinking about the safety aspect of it. It's not even just for our work, but it's also for how we can keep ourselves personally safe.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Right. Like what that physical safety can look like. And then you mentioned something interesting too, right? If you're a remote person all the time, or if you're connecting with the team remotely, what does cybersecurity look like in this day and age? How are you sending things appropriately? How are you following your rules and regulations, policies, and practices? I will tell you, if I get one more email that a major thing that I deal with has been hacked, my personal information is out there on the dark web, I feel like I'm getting an email like that every week at this point. So change all your passwords. Note to self: safety for yourself looks like change all your passwords and update things. So as we move forward, we're actually going to get you all into small groups for about 6 minutes, and I want you all to consider and actually rate. How would you rate the safety/culture of your work environment today on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 being the culture/safety needs major improvements. 5, we have a great culture, great safety, but nothing is perfect, continuing to improve. So just think about that. And then what are you all doing well in creating a culture of safety, both physically and emotionally, right? We can't assume that no one is doing anything. Some folks might already have best practice in place, whatever that means for your industry, your area. So please share a little bit of that. And then if you can just engage maybe one person, I'm not going to hear from everyone because obviously we want to stay within the time restraint, but if you can have someone prepared to share out what you all talked about. So please, please, please engage in your small groups to hear from one another. We'll pull you back in and have a larger conversation. And the questions are also in the chat as well. So this would be a great time if you're in a place and space to be on camera, to engage with folks. And again, just I encourage you all, much like if we were in person, to engage in your conversation. And we'll go into your breakout rooms now. All right. Like everyone's back in. Only one person. All right, if I can hear just from, oh, there we go. Thank you all for engaging in your small breakout group. If I could hear from maybe 1 or 2 folks about what was the conversation on your culture, how did you rate your culture, if you will, and what's going on that's going and doing well. 1 or 2 folks to engage and share. I did see the microphones going, so I saw that folks were talking in their small groups. What were you talking about?
So we talked about like our physical buildings here at Chalker Resource Center, and you know, we have made improvements over the years here at TCRC. Like there have been certain events that trigger things, right? So like physical safety, you know, we had a building close to San Bernardino County where there was a couple of terrorisms out there that was a couple of years ago, right? So that then created us to do security trainings with staff and also to do security guards and stuff for all the buildings. So we felt a little bit more secure. Culturally speaking, celebrate any holidays, right? We couldn't do any celebrations of any particular holiday. Type of events and what have you, we would have it more like a spring celebration versus like Easter celebration, right? And so we get more generalized, but as CCRC has grown, we're becoming a little bit more DEI, you know, embracing it. We're celebrating more culture. Like as you can see in my Zoom background, this wasn't allowed a couple of years ago, but now CCRC is creating ways to celebrate it. But then I had a conversation with some of my fellow colleagues where it's like that they feel like since coming back from COVID, a lot of that stuff has diminished, right? We wouldn't even get to celebrate like decorating people's cubicles. And I'm like, oh, that sounds a little different, but that's also maybe because we're also in this new environment. We're hybrid, we're remote. We have people who are on site every day. So maybe it's just the new norm, it's the new culture. I think we're also just still trying to get ourselves out of COVID, right? And even companies are navigating through this new environment themselves.
Thank you for that.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. That's helpful. You said something too, like physical safety, talking about your building. I don't know what it's been like for everyone, but I know we've done active shooter training. It's interesting to have to think about that type of safety. But that is important, right? Knowing the exits, knowing if there's a fire in your building, Where do all the employees go? Do they go across the street? What's the safe word? I know for our front desk person, there are some key words that if she says it, she picks up the phone and calls someone and says these key words, we know something's going down at the front and everyone needs to do certain things, right? So creating safe spaces is about all levels of safety, all manner of level of safety in your organization, your industry, your culture, right? And there's some bodies that check on that, right? We're in construction, so other habitat, got to watch out for the OSHA guys that are driving around looking to get on your job site to see what's happening, right? So there are certain, there are a lot of different levels, but in order for someone to want to report, in order for someone to feel comfortable enough to share when something isn't right or going right, be it physical or emotional safety, you have to create the environment for that. There are a lot of times we might say, how come that employee didn't speak up and they saw that? Well, what was the culture that was created for that person to want to share? Do they know how to report? Do they know what is reportable? So it's really important for us to engage that. So hopefully you all did have some robust conversations within your small groups, and then understanding what practices are already existing in your organization. So we're going to transition into the space I would like to just call mindset. Dr. Brent Smith has some really great information out there, comes from Rice University, and he's done a lot of work around psychological safety. If you were with us a few workshops ago, we did emotional intelligence and psychological safety. And so just some little tenets for you to consider and be reflective on. The right culture attracts the best employees, unleashes their passion, and provides focus for their collective efforts. It also serves as a blueprint for the actions of leaders. The wrong culture can cause internal friction, support behavior counter to strategic objectives, and damage employee commitment. Oftentimes when you see high turnover, it's not just about, oh, folks aren't getting paid, they're just due, right? Pay is a piece of that. But what's the culture? You can see a direct correlation to high turnover and a lack of retention in your organization connected to culture. What's allowed? Who's allowed to do what? When equity is not being engaged or equality in a space, people can feel it, right? When such and such does something and doesn't get in trouble, and someone else does the same thing and they keep getting reprimanded and written up, there's a discrepancy in your culture. So creating the culture is so important. Just some common language, because I threw out some of these words, emotional intelligence and psychological safety, just as a quick overview for us to connect. Emotional intelligence being recognizing and understanding and managing our own emotions, and then recognizing and understanding and influencing the emotions of others. Emotional intelligence is a set of abilities that can be measured, learned, practiced, and mastered. EI allows us to choose how we want to respond and behave. Emotional intelligence also goes by emotional quotient. So thinking about EI, EQ, from your own emotional intelligence to your staff, to your fellow colleagues, your supervisors, how are folks showing up in the workspace? Psychological safety is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. Oftentimes, emotional intelligence and psychological safety go hand in hand. And then the difference between safe workspace and brave workspace. And I'm going to be upfront. There was a time where folks were railing against both of these types of languages. And you may be in cities or spaces where they're like, we don't like safe space language. We don't like brave space language. That's something for you all to kind of consider when you're ushering these particular thoughts in. But a safe workspace is an environment where all employees feel continuous physical and psychological safety, clarified organizational values, positive co-working environment that fosters respect and accountability. A brave space, which is different, encompasses a safe space but moves into a space of discomfort for mutual learning and accountability. This space may tackle tough ideas and topics that may include, but are not limited to, justice, supremacy, systemic policy, oppression, and privilege, right? And some organizations are like, we're not touching those things. We're not a brave space. We just want to create basic level safety for our folks, right? So the difference between brave and safe workspace, I just want to make sure that that was shared in this particular space. But what's the data saying? McKinsey and Company, always a great place where I pull numbers, data, reports from. So if you're looking for more DEI information, multi-generational information, just general work environment and looking for some data points, please go to McKinsey and Company. This is a 2020 report, and it says the responsibility of business leaders to create a safe and respectful workplace. And this is just in US respondents, because they do global data pulls. but it says 89% of folks that responded say it's essential. It is the responsibility of business leaders to create safe and respectful spaces. 9% say it's important but non-essential, and 2% say not important at all. That's a pretty large response, and it is the business leader's job. And whatever leader looks like, if you're using formal language like CEO or executive director, board chair, manager, director, VP, whatever that language is, they're saying those named titled leaders is their responsibility to create a safe, respectful workspace. And so, in understanding that it's essential, it's important for those leaders to do that work. And maybe you're one of those leaders. So, if that is you, it is on your shoulders, and certainly not on your shoulders alone, but folks are looking to you to create that safe space, both physically and psychologically. In the skill set of this, foundation of a strong culture creates and has psychological safety, integrated inclusivity, and most importantly, accountability. And oftentimes that's where the ball drops. It is one thing to have a conversation, it is another thing to be accountable with steps, right? If someone needs to go on a performance plan, they need to put on a 30-day performance plan. And then what happens after that? And then what happens after that, right? If someone continues to make harassing comments and they're still there a year later making the same comments, that means that the behavior wasn't changed and it's allowed. And when you allow certain things in your culture, it leaves, it sets the tone for what everyone else can and cannot do. And so that is important to accountability. So we're going to take some time to review a couple of statements. And again, this is a team survey that you can actually take into your organization. You all are going to participate in that here, but on great teams, people feel psychologically safe. They feel comfortable speaking up, asking questions, admitting mistakes. To help us better understand if there's a quick kind of survey that I'm going to let you all review here in a second. It comes from Amy Edmondson, and she's also someone that has had a lot of work in psychological safety and emotional intelligence as well. And the rating is simple. Rate the statements on a scale of 1 to 5. 1, I strongly agree, or 5, I strongly disagree. These are the statements. They'll also be dropped in the chat for you as you go into your small breakout groups, but just take some time to rate each individual line. You can write it down or take a mental note. So when you think about individual safety, I'll read just a couple. In this team, it is easy to discuss difficult issues and problems. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. Team respect. In this team, people are accepted for being different. Team learning. On this team, people talk about mistakes and ways to improve and learn from them. So take some time to just kind of rate each thing. And this is kind of your personal rating of the safety of your organization. So as you take some time to just kind of rate those pieces, again, we'll put you in your breakout groups and just have some conversations in your breakout groups about what your rating is looking like at the individual level, the team level, team respect and team learning. And again, all right. Everybody is back. If I could just hear from a couple of folks or one person that might want to share, when you went through this, what was your kind of reflective thought? What score were you sitting at when you answered these questions? Had you thought about these things prior to this little tool?
Hi, I'll share. With our group, I think most of us that, did share were a 5. They definitely strongly agreed. One aspect is the team learning. I think us as an agency, we really thrive off making sure that our team is learning, making sure they are trained properly, making sure that their workspace, they're comfortable in learning. We set up benchmarks, to ensure that they're successful in what they're learning. Another big thing for us is team respect. We really kind of have a strong belief that respect is definitely something that everybody as an individual should be setting them, their standards high. And individuals, I mean, safety is definitely something we want to make sure that our staff feels. Like, I think it's really important that our staff, just with everything that's going on in the world, like just making sure that this is a safe place. And yeah, that's it for, that's a little the things that we talked about.
Okay, thank you for that. And hopefully a lot of folks were able to get to that 5. I also know, right, there's some areas where maybe the 5 is not there yet, right? You're still kind of working up to each of these pieces. You may consider, and you all will get some of the pieces of this PowerPoint. This will be on that. So when it's shot out to you, bring this to your team. Feel free to print it out, share it, and then ask the questions, how they feel, right? Because your perception is your perception, and especially as a leader or a manager, if you're in a titled role, it's interesting to get the feedback from the rest of your team to see what they would think where you all fall in individual safety, team respect, and team learning. So we'll continue to move forward. When we think about integrated inclusivity, because that's something that came up as one of those kind of 3 pillars in creating a safe space, but strengthening employee engagement, and that was shared a little bit here by Sylvia. How are you engaging and empowering your employees? What does that ongoing learning look like, right? And I'm not saying we all don't have budget to send folks to our professional conferences. Everyone would love to have more professional development dollars, and that's generally the first thing that gets cut when it's budget time. So what are some things that can encourage employees in your organization, and what does that look like? Be it mentorship, small work groups, engaging outside of the workplace, but how are you strengthening employee engagement ongoing? And what are those key performance indicators to move that forward? What does accountability look like in that? How are you measuring the employee engagement space? Maybe it's a subcommittee that is creating those touch points. Quarterly, you all come together. Monthly, we're coming together. What does engagement look like as you're one-on-oneing and you're asking that question? How do you feel like we're engaging our employees to bring their best self to work and actively participating in our organization's success? Building a positive organizational culture, right? And what does that look like? That starts with understanding what is your culture in the first place, right? We have stated values, we have stated mission and vision, but how does that translate into the day-to-day work? What are the relationships between colleagues? What are the relationships between superiors and colleagues? What's the power dynamic? Who gets to make all the decisions and who aren't allowed to make any decisions at all? So what does the culture look like? What does your culture have to look like when it's outward facing to clientele? What would the communities that you serve or the people that you serve say about your culture? When they walk into your space, what do they feel? So how are you kind of doing a 360 review of the organization's culture, both remotely or in person, right? There's a culture that exists, but what are you doing to engage and measure said culture? And how are you building that positive environment? Attracting and retaining talent. And that's something that we're all dealing with, right? Is getting folks in our industries, attracting them, and then retaining those that have been with us for a long time. Because sometimes we forget, we're so excited about bringing on new people, but how about the folks that have been with us for 10, 15, 20 years? How do they feel? Right? Sometimes we are creating better benefits packages and we're bringing in people at higher rates of pay. Yet we've had people that have worked with our organizations for 15 plus years, and they're like, how is this person coming in at $15 an hour? And I didn't get a raise until last year. These are real discussions for us to consider when we're thinking about our culture, and what it looks like to both keep our most talented and long-term folks, right? That wisdom that they carry. How do we make sure that we still observe that while also bringing in new folks? And then the intersections of the identities of the people that we work with, right? Our underrepresented groups. What's going on there? Do we need to have affinity groups? How are we supporting the different diversity assets that are on our job sites every day? And how are we leading that? This is just something for you to consider. We won't actually break out, but in this space, with your score, how did the score differ from the first breakout? So we kind of talked about a gauge of a score, but then when you went more in depth, was there a change in that Does it change depending on where you're at, department, area, people that you're engaging with across the organization, right? And what does your score tell you about your perceived psychological safety? So this is more something for you all to be reflective on in just thinking about what those scores mean to you. And if you brought that back to your team today, whoever makes up your team, or sent it to another team in your organization, what would that look like for them? And then talk about those scores and look at benchmarking and how you can actually make those scores better. We talked about accountability and this little tool, if you wanted to use it, what would it look like to do some baseline measurements, right? So stage one, what needs to be brought into this process, right? Does leadership need to buy in and make a difference, or is this something that you can deploy? Right? Sometimes grassroots leadership is a great way to do things, but if you don't have buy-in from your your grass tops or your folks at the top of the food chain, then things can't change. So what level of engagement is needed? Stage two, who is responsible for the distribution of surveys and survey collection, right? This could be a little bit more impromptu. If you want to treat it as just a quick dialogue, that's one thing. But if you want to put this in a Google survey or a Qualtrics survey, whatever surveying tool you're using, you can plot those questions in and then chart what people are saying, right? So who is going to be responsible for that work and keeping it up to date and making sure that folks' surveys are coming back in. Stage three, identify who you want to administer surveys. Survey for survey's sake is not worth it, because people don't want to just take surveys and give you feedback and responses and nothing happens with it, or it sits. So being mindful of when you deploy things are important. Stage four, review the survey data and discuss how this information will be disseminated, right? So the other thing is people don't like to take surveys and then it just stays with management and they're talking about everything, but it never comes back out, right? If you are checking the temperature or the culture of your organization, you actually don't share your culture survey, people are going to say, why are you putting this out there? And then if you're not honest with the feedback that you receive, because if you find out, ooh, we got some big issues in our culture and you don't put that data back out, then people are going to question your transparency. So be prepared for the responses that you're going to get and be prepared to engage and mitigate any of the blowback that may come from a survey when you ask about what the culture feels like in your organization. And then lastly, create priorities on what needs to be addressed and what needs to be celebrated, right? There's a couple of you all that said, we're sitting at 5s. Have you all been celebrating those 5s, right? How do you encourage and ensure that folks say, you know, I love working here. This is not a toxic environment. You got to celebrate some of those small wins. So there's a lot of environments out there where it's like, while that is the norm, we also want to make sure that folks understand, because that is not the norm for all organizations. And ultimately creating those priorities to move the needle on as a baseline of measurement. So you all have a tool set to utilize, but in that you want to prioritize, counter, set the expectation. And then last but not least, you all are going to be part of me. Cultural humility is just a part of some of the things I like to share. So when we think about just each level of prioritization in safety in the workplace, what is your individual role? What's happening at your micro level, and then what's happening at the macro level, the larger organization? For you, that could look like modeling good customer service internally and externally. How you treat individuals in your organization and those outside of your organization is clear, right? So that's important. What does good customer service look like? When we interact with one another, when I ask for something of my colleague, do I know I'm going to get my hand snapped off? Or do I know that we have a good working relationship on the inside? What's happening inside will show on the outside as well. Modeling curiosity, asking the appropriate questions, but also ensuring that you're engaging across your organization, not just about work, but just getting to know the people that you work with. When you know a little bit about people's personal life or their life, because we spend most of our time at work. If you're like me, I'm at work almost 8 hours a day, if not more. My work family, whether I want to do family or not, become family. You spend so much time with folks. So how do you engage and really get to know them, knowing how they tick? There are love languages for your workspace. I did the love languages with my partner, but they also have it to where you can take love languages for work. So you know what folks like and how they like to be engaged, right? Be transparent and vulnerable. Building trust is important. Trust goes a long way. If I know that if I report something, it'll be properly handled and it's not going to be spread across the organization like gossip, I'm more apt to be open and honest about how I feel about something. Inclusive language always goes a long way. and engaging accessible practices, and then leaning into supportive coaching as an approach to leadership. At the micro level, understand and be honest about your work culture. Clear expectations always go a long way. One-on-ones are important. Staff meetings, no one likes to have their meetings canceled every week. There's no way to show me how unimportant I am when every week we're supposed to meet at 1 o'clock and you never make it, right? Those meetings are important. If I'm coming to those meetings 10 minutes late, we meet once a month and I can't even make it on time, that sends a message to your colleagues, your staff, your employees. So set meetings and stick to them and meet regularly, especially if you have a large team. Those direct contacts, your managers, whoever you're meeting with, your board members, keep those meetings and try to have those touch points as best, even if it's 30 minutes or an hour, protect those time frames to meet with your people. That's such a big deal. Retreats, if you can. Again, that helps you to reiterate culture. If you have major employee handbook changes, you can go over those things at your retreats. And if you can't do a half day or a full day, staff meetings go a long way. And hour meetings go a long way to just share all those things all at once to give folks the opportunity to hear what your priorities are. And then engage in an asset-minded approach. It's easy to be deficit-minded, right? We could always say, the refrigerator is never clean, the bathrooms are always gross, right? What are the opportunities in that? Where could you come at it with an asset-minded approach to say, we have an opportunity to really take care of what we own? How can we engage in keeping cleanly spaces, cleanly shared spaces? And then reframe mistakes, again, always an opportunity. At the macro level, brainstorming out loud, modeling active listening, uplifting and sharing your own vulnerabilities as the lead or leader. Some folks are considered leaders and they are not actually titled leaders. They have the heart of the people in your organization. Who are those ambassadors that can talk to everyone and get everyone galvanized and on the same page? Sometimes those are your best leaders in an organization. If they have the trust of the rest of the organization, you want them championing changes and opportunities, embracing productive conflict through sincere dialogue and constructive debate. Let folks ask questions. Sometimes we get in a place where we are so infallible that we don't even want people to ask questions because we take that as they're coming for me or they don't trust my leadership. When someone can ask questions, that is a level of comfort. Now, there's some people that want to question you to showcase that you don't know what you're talking about. That's a thing too. But when you open up and share and say, I don't know that answer, but I'll get back to you, that gives people the opportunity to say they can question my leadership. They don't feel like I'm just above them talking down, but that we're having a collective dialogue and conversation and letting appropriate debate happen. Create space for, not everyone has to have the same thought process. We all don't have to agree to move things forward. There can be someone that says, I don't like that idea, but I'm going to move forward with you. But honest debate is really important, constructive debate as well. And then address discomfort, retaliation, and intentional disruption in spaces. We all know that there are folks in our environment that are just negative to the organization. It's important to get an understanding as to why that person is always disruptive or upset or stopping progress. There may be some things that they're experiencing in the culture that you're not aware of. Maybe some things going on in their personal life that you're not aware of. There could be some things for you to engage, but it is always important to address any intentional disruption because that is what makes folks leave your organization. And then obviously counteract and know your culture. It's important to take a thorough examination of your organization's policies, procedures. When was the last time these things were revised? When was the last time your handbook was updated? When was the last time you all looked at job descriptions and that folks are actually doing what's in the job description? Oftentimes those are important to do annually, particularly around evaluation time. When you're doing evaluations, are the people that have been with you for 5, 10, 15 years, are they doing more than what their job description is? And have you updated those things? That's really important as well. And then how does pay align with those updates? Assess whether these policies are still relevant and necessary in today's context. If you all are doing hybrid work, remote work, and you don't have a policy handbook that now reflects the new nature and culture that you're working in, you need to go back and assess the environment and how you work now and what policies need to catch up with how you've evolved as an organization. a comprehensive review on your printed materials, marketing strategies, websites, digital, physical information that's out there. All of that should be looked at. That's important. Ensuring that things still align with your values and objectives, right? Oftentimes at your annual retreats or your biannual retreats, you're looking at, do the mission and vision still make sense for what we do now, particularly as small nonprofits? Things change. You all might go after grants that create scope creep. Maybe there's some things you want to stop going after because that's not even at the essence of your organization, and that can hurt the culture of your organization as well. If you're not sticking to what that is, what are the cultural norms with your organization alongside the communities that you serve or work alongside? And then interactions are so important. Every day to day, every moment to moment interaction, are they being utilized with humility and openness? How you engage with folks speaks volume as well. So what's going on in that space, and how you acknowledge the people that you work alongside. And then recognizing the importance of language. Educate yourself on the appropriate pronouns, first person language. This is not necessarily new if you've come to these workshops, but respecting and affirming the identities of those in your workspace are so important. And how are we ensuring that we're following that? Being clear in your expectations, be upfront about your organization's culture and values. Turning your core values into core competencies. You can actually measure your values, take those value statements, and then align them in. These are the competencies of the work, and this is how we evaluate them. Maybe those actually show up in your job appraisals and evaluations. How do folks actually model your values? Set behavioral and performance expectations with your team, holding people accountable, coaching subtle and explicit behaviors is important. And then just evaluating your initiatives around creating safe space. This is something that we all can engage in. I do have just a quick clip because I know we're coming up on time. We won't watch the whole video, but just again, just some things to underscore ways to improve your culture. And this will be sent to for you all to watch on your own. Make sure that was definitely is where it needs to be.
Any expert with experience creating a positive work culture will tell you it's all about one thing:
People.
people. Improving their experience at work will, by proxy, improve the culture of any organization. Here's 5 ways you can make it a positive one. Number 5, collect feedback. Such a huge endeavor like making impactful changes to your company culture requires an idea of what to focus on. Knowing what you should do to make your work culture more positive should start by asking the people who experience it every day.
If I was part of an organization that was new and had this passion around, a key driver for us is going to be creating a human workplace, I would say, let's pool all of our thoughts on 1, what we think that means, 2, how we think we get there, and then start to collate that into how does that translate into work? What needs to exist here and be true no matter what part of the business you're in, as we think about growth and scale, etc.
Number 4, celebrate life events. One of the most powerful ways to show employees you care about them and their well-being is to acknowledge who they are outside the confines of work.
If you get all the peers around you recognizing you, celebrating who you are, and essentially saying to you, I not only see what you're doing at work and appreciate it, I see who you are, that's a connection to all these different people who are doing that for you. And each of those connections is a tie to the organization. When this is happening really well and across a number of peers, the person feels like they're part of a community, and people don't leave their communities easily.
Number 3, build trust. At the core of every great relationship is trust. And one of the quickest ways to establish that is to communicate. At work, a critical communication practice is the check-in, a chance for managers, employers, and even peers to see how things are going and what's happening at home or at work.
So I like to talk about what I call the generous check-in. please don't just check in on what the person is doing, check in on how they are and who they are. But don't go in cold, okay? Like, you have to build a foundation for this. You can't just go in and expect people to spill their guts, especially if something rough is going on in their life. You have to set the tone and let the person know it's safe. How do you do that as a leader? You do it first. You model the behavior. I'm not saying that you should just overshare about what's going on in your personal life. What I'm saying is be vulnerable.
Number 2, recognize your employees. It seems basic, but some people still don't see the value of showing appreciation at work. Dr. Misha Ann Martin, do you have anything to say to these detractors?
I say, where would you want to work? Do you want to go into work somewhere where somebody never says thank you? Where you don't feel like that organization sees and appreciates your unique talents, capabilities, and contributions? Or do you want to go to work somewhere where you feel like not only can you be yourself, but they value specifically what you bring to the table, and they say thank you to you for that all the time? So I know where I want to work, but I also know what our research says. Our research says that people disproportionately want to work at and are likely to stay at organizations where they feel like they are appreciated. So please, say thank you.
Number 1, prioritize psychological safety. People are at their best when they can be themselves, when they aren't afraid to take a risk or make a suggestion, when they feel included for who they are. At work, we define this as psychological safety.
The ideal workplace, in my opinion, would first and foremost be psychologically safe, which means that you can express what's going on not only at work, but also what's going on outside of work. You can be fully yourself. You don't have to feel like you need to project this work persona that is different than who you are in your personal life.
The truest way we can create a psychologically safe environment is to understand our people, to know our people, and understand what would make each one of them as an individual feel psychologically safe. That's going to be different for me than it is for you or for someone else on my team. And if you don't know what would make them feel psychologically safe, I might suggest you need to spend some more time with them in order to know that.
We were actually able to get through the video so that we've come on 2 minutes time. But again, just some things for you all to consider as you think about your culture and how to create that safe space, right? It is going to take work, and it's going to take some of those simple tenets, those things that we may have learned growing up, but also how do we actually deploy these opportunities. Next steps, just some questions again for you to consider and be reflective on. How can you cultivate a culture of safety within your organization? Fostering an environment where team members feel comfortable taking risks and expressing their true thoughts and feelings. And if you're doing that well now, how are you showcasing that you do that well? Which strategy should you emphasize to ensure psychological, physical safety becomes a cornerstone of your organization's culture? And in the next month, what concrete steps will you take to actively contribute to the creation or improvement of spaces within your team or department? Who will you enlist as a partner in these endeavors to help uphold your commitment and hold you accountable? And you can actually take these 3 questions to your team. So take the survey and then put this up as a follow-up to the survey and create those kind of key indicators. How are we performing in this space? How are we prioritizing? Where are we doing great? Where are we not doing so great? And move those items forward within your organization. And then lastly, right, cultural humility. It goes a long way, right? The process of continuing to value and learn, learning about yourself, and then learning about the cultures and the things that other folks bring into a space. And that's a lifelong commitment, right? Critical self-reflection, a desire to fix power imbalances. So what's happening in your organization? And then accountability, mutual respect, and partnership based on trust. And so do you feel like you have the buy-in and the trust of your organization? Just some resources if you're looking to strengthen your emotional intelligence or psychological safety in your organization, some good writings here for you to consider. And then there's a number of other really great books and information out there. TED Talks too, if you will. Simply type in psychological safety. You will get no shortage of TED Talks that populate for you. now we are at the end and we have a little bit of time for questions. Any thoughts, opportunities, things that may have been missed, things that you all would like to have heard, things that you all are doing really well already? If none, I'm here for a little moment. I'll turn it back over to Darrell.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen again. Again, if you have not had the opportunity yet to go ahead and sign in, here's the QR code. You can sign in using that. If you have not yet signed in the chat box, you can scan the QR code and do that as well. So our next workshop topic will be cultivate an inclusive work environment through employee resource groups. That will be April the 10th. And also we will have a makeup date for Wednesday, May the 1st, the LGBTQ plus inclusion. So save that date as well. That will be our last session with Ms. Danielle Johnson. Again, we want to say thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week. If you have any further questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or come off mute and talk to Danielle. If not, you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you next week. Bye now.
Thank you.